At my retirement party, my boss handed me a white envelope and said, "You earned this." Everyone around me clapped and cheered. Balloons floated against the ceiling. People raised their glasses, and I smiled because that's what you're supposed to do after 32 years in one company. But deep down, something about that moment didn't feel right. His smile looked too controlled, too rehearsed. When I got home that evening, I opened the envelope again. Inside was a check, a bonus for my loyal service. I stared at it for a long time, thinking how good it felt to finally be appreciated. But that feeling didn't last long. The next morning, I went to the bank to deposit it. The teller looked at the check, then looked at me with a strange expression. She said she needed to verify it with her manager. A few minutes later, a call came through. The branch manager asked me to step into his office. My heart started racing. He looked serious when he said, "Ma'am, this check is fraudulent. Did you write it yourself?" I felt the world tilt. "No," I said quietly. "It's from my employer." He frowned. "We've already flagged the account. You need to speak with your company immediately." I walked out of that bank with shaking hands. I kept hearing my boss's voice in my head. "You earned this." What was happening? Why would he give me a fake check at my own retirement party? That was the moment everything started unraveling. Before I tell you what happened next, make sure to subscribe for more stories like this and comment below where you're watching from. This one is personal, and you won't believe how it ends. My name is Lydia Moore. I'm 59 years old, and for more than 3 decades, I worked at Harrington and Holt Manufacturing. I started there when I was 27, fresh out of community college, just a shy girl trying to prove herself. I was the one who came in early, stayed late, and made sure every file, every budget, every record balanced to the last cent. I didn't climb the ladder like others did. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't loud. I just worked hard and helped people when they needed it. If someone forgot a deadline, I stayed late to fix it. If a coworker messed up a report, I took the blame so they wouldn't lose their job. For years, I thought that kind of loyalty would pay off. My boss, Richard Harrington, was one of those men who could make anyone believe he cared. He was charming at every meeting, the kind of person who'd remember your birthday but forget to give you your raise. People admired him, but I'd seen a side of him others hadn't. The way his voice turned cold when he spoke to certain employees. The way his smile disappeared the second the cameras were off. Still, I kept my head down. I told myself, just get to retirement. You've earned your peace. At home, I had my husband Ben cheering me on. He was a retired firefighter, the kind of man who always believed in doing what's right no matter how small the job. And then there was my daughter, Olivia. She's a college professor now. She always said, "Mom, you're the most honest person I know." The week before my retirement party, Ben told me, "After this, no more stress. We'll go fishing, travel, maybe even spoil our granddaughter when she comes along." I smiled, thinking that maybe, finally, I could breathe. On the day of my retirement, the office was decorated with streamers and gold balloons. Someone brought cupcakes, and everyone gathered around the conference room table. Richard stood up and gave a short speech about loyalty, hard work, and the value of long-term employees. Everyone clapped politely. He turned to me with that smooth smile and said, "Lydia, you've been the heart of this company for over 30 years. We couldn't have done it without you. You've earned this." He handed me a white envelope with my name written in fancy gold ink. I felt a lump in my throat. I smiled, thanked him, and hugged Dana, my closest friend in the office. She whispered, "I can't believe it's really over. You deserve every bit of that bonus." Later, when everyone left, Dana leaned in and said quietly, "Weird he didn't sign it in front of you, huh?" I laughed it off. "It's fine. I trust him." That night, I put the check on my dresser beside my retirement card, the one everyone signed. I remember reading the notes. "We'll miss you. Don't forget to visit. Enjoy your freedom." I had no idea that the next morning, those same people would be whispering about me behind my back. At that moment, I was just grateful. Grateful that I'd made it through, that I was leaving with dignity and a little appreciation. But life has a way of testing the quiet one, because by the next afternoon, I wasn't the woman they were celebrating. I was the woman they were accusing. The morning after my retirement party, I woke up smiling for the first time in months. I brewed my coffee, fed our old cat, and looked at the check sitting on the kitchen counter. After 32 years of long days, skipped lunches, and unpaid overtime, it finally felt like it all meant something. Ben kissed my forehead before heading out to run errands and said, "You earned that, Lydia. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Around 10, I drove to the bank. The teller was a young man I'd seen a few times before, friendly, polite. I handed him the check, signed my name, and waited. He smiled and said, "Congratulations on your retirement," before walking to the back. I assumed he was processing it, but after a few minutes, he didn't return. Instead, his manager, a woman in her 40s, came over and asked, "Mrs. Moore, could we speak in my office for a moment?" Something in her tone made my stomach twist. Inside her office, she closed the door gently and slid the check across the desk toward me. "Did you write this yourself?" she asked. I blinked, confused. "What? No. My boss gave it to me yesterday at my retirement party." She frowned. "We've contacted the issuing bank, and this check has been reported as invalid. The account number doesn't exist in their system. We'll have to hold it for now. I'm sorry." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "That's impossible," I said. "It came straight from the company, from Richard Harrington himself." She gave me a sympathetic look. "You might want to call him." When I walked out of that bank, the check felt heavier in my hand than it had the night before. I sat in my car for nearly 10 minutes before dialing Richard's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice cheerful. "Lydia? Enjoying retirement already?" I swallowed hard. "Richard, the bank just called. They said the check you gave me was invalid. They think it's fake." There was a pause. Then his tone shifted, low and careful. "That's strange. It must be a mix-up. Let me look into it." "I'm at the bank right now," I said. "They said the account number doesn't exist." He sighed softly. "Tell them you'll deposit it again later. These things happen." But his voice sounded too smooth, too rehearsed, like someone who'd already practiced what to say. When I hung up, I didn't feel better. I drove straight back to the office. The receptionist looked surprised to see me. "Lydia, I thought you retired yesterday. I need to speak with Richard," I said. When I walked into his office, he was sitting at his desk, typing. He looked up, all fake concern. "Lydia, you didn't need to come in. I need to know what's going on," I said firmly. "Why would the check you gave me bounce? Why would the bank think it's fake?" He leaned back in his chair, pretending to think. "I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe you made an error when you deposited it. Are you saying this is my fault?" I asked, my voice rising. He sighed, almost annoyed. "Let's not turn this into something it's not. You got your pension and your benefits. The bonus was a gesture. If you mishandled it, that's not on me." I stood there staring at him. Something about the way he said gesture made my blood boil. He was acting like he'd done me a favor instead of robbing me. When I turned to leave, I noticed two people standing in the hallway, Linda from HR and Martin from accounting, watching me. Their faces were tight, unreadable. As I passed them, I heard Linda whisper, "She's making a scene." By the time I got home, the rumors had already started. Dana called that evening, her voice uneasy. "Lydia, I need to tell you something. HR sent an email saying you might have tried to cash an unauthorized company check." I nearly dropped the phone. "They're accusing me of forgery?" "I know it's ridiculous," Dana said, "but Richard told everyone to let HR handle it. He's making it sound like you tried to scam the company." I sank into a chair, my hands shaking. 32 years of loyalty, and now they were painting me as a criminal. Ben found me like that, holding the phone, pale and silent. He sat beside me and said, "We're not letting him get away with this." That night, I went into my home office to find any paperwork I still had from work, old payroll forms, audit reports, copies of company memos. I opened a drawer and found something I hadn't touched in years, a small black USB recorder. It was scratched and dusty, but when I turned it on, the tiny light blinked. I'd forgotten how often I used it. For years, I recorded meetings, because Richard had a habit of changing his words after decisions were made. I used it to protect myself when things went wrong. What started as a habit became routine. I had years of files, dozens of conversations saved, some harmless, some not. That night, I pressed play on one labeled Meeting Room B, May 12th, 2015. I heard Richard's voice, laughing with another manager. We'll take the retirement funds from payroll and call it an internal reallocation. She won't notice a thing. Lydia's too loyal for her own good. My breath caught in my throat. I played another file, then another. It was all there. His voice, his plans, every unethical move he'd made, recorded without him ever realizing. He thought he could take everything from me, but what he didn't know was that I'd been recording him for 10 years. And for the first time in weeks, I stopped shaking. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the proof. I sat in my home office that night, surrounded by folders, receipts, and flash drives scattered across the desk. The small black recorder rested in my hand, like a secret I had been saving for a moment I didn't even know was coming. For 10 years, it had quietly captured the truth, while I went on pretending not to see what was happening around me. I had always told myself I didn't want trouble, that speaking up would only ruin my life. But now my life was already ruined. My reputation, my name, my 32 years of work, all destroyed in one day by a man who thought he could humiliate me and walk away smiling. Ben walked into the room with 2 cups of coffee and said softly, "You've been in here for hours. What are you doing?" I looked up at him and said, "I'm listening to everything he ever said behind closed doors." At first, I didn't know what I was searching for. I just played each recording one by one, taking notes, marking dates. I heard his voice talking about fake invoices, misused company funds, bonuses that never reached employees, and even conversations about moving retirement contributions into accounts under his control. Each file was like opening another wound, but it also lit a fire inside me. The anger that had once made me cry was now turning into focus. Ben sat beside me, his hand resting on my shoulder. "You've got enough here to bury him," he said. I nodded. "But I can't just hand this to HR. They'll protect him. I need to make sure it gets to the right people." By morning, I called Dana and asked her to meet me at a small diner outside town. She looked nervous when she arrived, glancing around like someone might be watching. I told her everything. The recordings, the check, the false accusations. Her face went pale. "Lydia, if even half of that is real, he's going to prison," she whispered. "It's real," I said, sliding my phone across the table so she could hear Richard's voice saying, "She's too old to keep up, but let's keep her around until we can drain the last of her account." Dana covered her mouth. "He's talking about your pension." I nodded. "That's exactly what he's talking about." She looked around the diner again, lowering her voice. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to make sure he never does this to anyone else." That afternoon, with Ben's help, I organized every file, every recording, every document. I labeled them with dates and descriptions. Meeting notes, bonus fund discussion, HR cover-up, retirement manipulation. Years of quiet loyalty now formed a timeline of greed and corruption. Once I had everything in order, I reached out to an old friend of Ben's, Michael Torres, a retired police officer who now worked as a private investigator. We met at his small office downtown. When I played him just one clip, his eyes widened. "You've been sitting on this for how long?" he asked. 10 years, I said. He shook his head slowly. "Most people wouldn't have the patience or the evidence you've got. You've got him cold." Michael helped me format the files into a secure drive and suggested I send copies to multiple places so nothing could disappear. That night, I sent everything anonymously to the state attorney's office, the Department of Labor, and a local investigative journalist named Ellen Rhodes, who was known for exposing corporate fraud. The next morning, before I did anything else, I sent one final email to everyone at Harrington and Holt. I didn't use my name. I simply wrote, "Before you judge what you think you know, listen to what's been said about you when you weren't in the room." Attached was a single audio clip, Richard bragging about cutting bonuses and mocking the people who trusted him. I clicked send and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Relief, not happiness, not revenge, just the quiet satisfaction of truth finally moving forward. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Dana. Her voice was shaking. "Lydia, everyone's talking about the recording. People are freaking out. HR locked Richard's office door. The company's lawyers are already there." I felt my pulse quicken. Did anyone say anything about me? Only that they owe you an apology, she said. "You should see their faces. It's like someone just pulled the rug out from under all of them." Later that night, the local news broke a story. Harrington and Holt, CEO, under investigation for employee fund misuse. They didn't mention my name, but I didn't need them to. I knew exactly where that story came from. I watched the report sitting beside Ben, holding his hand. When the reporter played a short clip of Richard's voice, his tone arrogant and smug as he talked about redirecting funds, I closed my eyes and exhaled. Ben turned to me. "You did it, Lydia. You actually did it." I smiled faintly. "No, he did it to himself. I just pressed record." That night, I finally slept. For the first time in years, I didn't dream about deadlines or office walls or fake smiles. I dreamed about freedom, the kind that comes when the truth finally speaks louder than the lies. The next morning, I woke up to dozens of messages from former coworkers thanking me. Some apologized. Others confessed that they had known something was wrong, but were too scared to say anything. I replied to only one message from Dana. She wrote, "You gave all of us our voice back." I typed back, "All I did was stop pretending not to hear." And as I hit send, I realized that for 10 long years, I had been collecting more than recordings. I had been collecting courage. 2 mornings after I sent those recordings, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing nonstop. At first, I thought it was another wave of apologies from coworkers, but when I glanced at the screen, I saw messages pouring in from unknown numbers, each one saying the same thing: "Turn on the news." I rushed into the living room where Ben was already standing in front of the television. The local anchor was speaking quickly, her tone serious. "Breaking news this morning. Richard Harrington, CEO of Harrington and Holt Manufacturing, is under federal investigation for embezzlement and employee fund fraud. Sources say the allegations come from recordings recently sent to the state attorney's office." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of the couch. They played one of the recordings live on air, Richard's voice, smooth and mocking. "They'll never know where the money went," he said, laughing. "Half these people can barely read a ledger." Hearing his arrogance echo through my living room made my stomach twist, but it also filled me with a kind of peace. The truth was finally out. Ben turned down the volume and smiled at me. "Looks like justice is finally clocking in." By noon, the story had spread everywhere. Reporters gathered outside the company gates, employees whispered to the press, and the board of directors called an emergency meeting. Dana texted me from the office. "He's losing it." He locked himself inside his office. FBI agents just walked in. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone, heart pounding. For years, I had imagined this man as untouchable. Now, he was just another headline, another liar caught by his own words. Around 3 in the afternoon, the news updated again. Richard had been escorted out of the building in handcuffs. The cameras caught his face. No confidence left, just confusion and anger. He shouted something to reporters as they pushed microphones toward him, but the sound of cameras clicking drowned him out. Dana called me a few minutes later, her voice shaking between laughter and tears. "Lydia, you should have seen it. People were cheering. The same people who were scared to say anything for years finally stood up. They were clapping as he walked past." I didn't know what to say. My throat tightened. For 32 years, I had kept my head down and stayed silent. And now, silence had become my weapon. That evening, my name still hadn't been made public, but people at the office knew. Dana said employees were whispering things like, "It had to be Lydia," and "She was always too smart to fall for his tricks." Some even reached out to me directly, thanking me for saving their pensions. I felt proud, but also strangely sad. I had spent my whole life trying to keep that place running, and now it was crumbling under the truth. Later that night, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, Michael Torres, the retired officer who had helped me organize the evidence, was standing there holding a folder. "It's official," he said. "They've charged him with 4 counts of fraud and embezzlement. He's facing serious prison time." I stared at the folder, barely able to speak. "It's really over?" Michael smiled. "For him, yes. For you, it's a new beginning." After he left, Ben poured 2 cups of coffee and said, "You know, you could have walked away and never fought back. But you didn't. That's something." I looked out the window, the evening sun spilling gold across the backyard. "I didn't want revenge," I said quietly. "I just wanted my name back." The next day, I received a letter from the company's board. They issued a public apology and reinstated my full pension, plus 10 years of unpaid bonuses and compensation for emotional distress. The letter ended with one sentence that made me laugh out loud. "Your commitment to honesty has reminded us what true integrity looks like." Dana called again, crying this time. "Lydia, everyone in accounting is talking about starting a scholarship in your name for women in business. You changed everything here." I felt tears run down my face. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't scared. I was free. That weekend, Olivia came home. She wrapped her arms around me and said, "Mom, you didn't just retire. You took down a monster." I smiled and said, "He built the trap himself. I just turned on the light." We sat on the porch that evening with Ben, sipping coffee while the sun set. The neighborhood was quiet, except for the sound of birds and a gentle breeze rustling through the trees. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Then my phone buzzed one more time. A message from an unknown number. It read, "You'll pay for this." I froze. Ben saw my face and took the phone from my hand. He read the message and said, "He's trying to scare you. Don't let him." 2 days later, the police confirmed that Richard had been denied bail. The message had likely been sent before his arrest. Knowing that he was behind bars finally settled the last bit of fear inside me. In the weeks that followed, the news covered his trial, but I stayed out of the spotlight. I never gave interviews or appeared on TV. I didn't need attention. I had my peace. Still, one night, when I was scrolling online, I saw a headline that made me pause. "Anonymous whistleblower brings down corporate fraud ring." It felt good to know the world finally unbent. Months later, Dana sent me a photo of the new plaque in the office hallway. It read, "In honor of Lydia Moore for 32 years of honesty, strength, and courage." I printed it and framed it on my wall. That was the moment I realized I didn't just expose him. I changed the story of my own life. I went from the quiet woman in the corner to the voice that ended corruption. And to anyone who's ever been silenced or underestimated, I'll say this: never mistake quiet for weakness. Sometimes silence is just the sound of someone recording the truth. 3 months passed after Richard's arrest, and life finally began to settle into something that felt normal again. The first few weeks were strange. My phone rang nonstop. Reporters, former coworkers, even strangers who said they admired me. I ignored most of them. I didn't want fame. I wanted peace. I wanted to wake up without that heavy feeling in my chest, without the fear that someone was trying to take everything I had worked for. Ben and I moved slower now. Our mornings started with coffee on the porch instead of traffic and deadlines. The air smelled of pine and rain, and the quiet felt unfamiliar but good. Some days I would still wake early, instinctively reaching for the alarm I didn't need anymore. Old habits die hard after 32 years. The town newspaper ran the story for weeks. Every headline had his name and the words fraud, embezzlement, and betrayal. They never printed mine, but people knew. When I went grocery shopping, strangers stopped me to shake my hand. "You're that lady from Harrington and Holt, right? Good for you," they'd say. I smiled politely, but what I really wanted was to disappear from the noise and just live quietly again. Olivia visited often after the case ended. One night, we sat at the kitchen table eating pie, and she said, "Mom, do you realize how many people you helped? There are families who got their retirement money back because of you." I shrugged. I didn't do it for anyone else. I just wanted the truth to come out. She smiled. "That's what makes it powerful. You never wanted revenge. You wanted fairness. That's rare." Her words stayed with me. I thought about all the people who had stayed silent for years, too afraid to lose their jobs or reputations. I used to be one of them, but once you're pushed to the edge, silence stops feeling safe. It starts to feel like a cage. A month later, I received an invitation from the company's new leadership team. They were hosting a small ceremony to honor long-term employees and wanted to dedicate a plaque in my name. I almost didn't go. I didn't need recognition, and part of me never wanted to walk into that building again. But Ben said softly, "You deserve to walk back in there with your head high. Don't let that place be a memory of fear." So I went. When I stepped into the lobby, everything looked different. The atmosphere that once felt heavy was lighter. People smiled genuinely. Dana rushed over and hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "You did it," she said. "You changed everything here." The ceremony was simple. No grand speeches, no cameras, just employees who wanted to say thank you. They unveiled a bronze plaque that read, "In honor of Lydia Moore, for 32 years of honesty, courage, and integrity." I ran my fingers over the engraved letters and felt tears sting my eyes. For the first time, my name was carved into something permanent. Not because I worked quietly behind the scenes, but because I refused to stay quiet when it mattered. After the ceremony, Dana and I went for coffee. She told me that the company had implemented new ethics policies, mandatory audits, and employee protection systems, so no one could be silenced again. "It's strange," she said, smiling faintly. "It took you retiring to make them finally listen." I laughed. Better late than never. Life slowly returned to its rhythm. I started volunteering at a local business center, teaching young accountants how to protect themselves in the workplace. I didn't tell them every detail of my story, but I told them enough. I taught them to document everything, trust their instincts, and never let anyone make them feel small. Every time a student thanked me, I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who kept her head down, afraid to speak. That woman was gone now. One afternoon, I received a letter from the state attorney's office. Richard had pleaded guilty to all charges. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Reading that letter didn't bring joy. It brought closure. Justice doesn't always feel like celebration. It often feels like quiet relief. That night, Ben and I sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the trees. The sky turned soft shades of gold and pink. He reached over, took my hand, and said, "You know, you could write a book about all this." I laughed. "Maybe I already did," I said, glancing at the notebook on the table beside me, the one where I'd started writing my own story, not for fame, but so that someday Olivia's kids would know what really happened. As the crickets began to sing, I realized how far I'd come. For decades, I'd been the quiet one, the dependable one, the woman everyone trusted to fix their mistakes. Now, I was the one who had forced the truth into the light, and I did it without raising my voice. If there's one thing I learned, it's that doing the right thing doesn't always make you popular. It might cost you comfort, friends, or even your peace for a while. But in the end, truth doesn't need applause. It just needs someone brave enough to carry it. I looked over at Ben and smiled. "I'm not afraid of silence anymore," I said. "Silence can be powerful when you know what it's hiding." That night, I closed my eyes knowing I had nothing left to prove, only stories left to tell. If this story inspired you or kept you hooked until the end, make sure to subscribe to my channel for more true and powerful stories and comment below where you're watching from. I love hearing your thoughts and knowing how far these stories travel. Your support helps me share more voices like Lydia Moore's and remind the world that even the quietest person can make the loudest difference.